Welcome to Tuesday Talks, and my special guest today is Fran Garton, and I'm really excited because Fran Garton is a speaker, writer, body positive personal trainer, pain reduction coach, and fibromyalgia warrior, and teaches people to live pain-free. Now, her passion is advocating for inclusive movement practices, body acceptance, stress reduction, and learning to love movement. Fran is passionate about teaching people how to live pain-free and learn to love the movement. And I am just so excited to chat to you, Fran, because being in the healthcare field, I am so passionate about, like I work with business women, and I'm really passionate about them to understand what is happening with their body. And yes, the medical field's great, yet we need what you do as well. And so I'd love for you to tell us, just a little bit of how you actually got into this.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love to share my story because I hope that it inspires people to see that there can be a different life than the one that they're currently maybe stuck in.
Mm.
And that's kind of where I was. So in 2011, 2012, I was working as an adult educator with the school board, working full time. And when you work for somebody else, they make rules or they ask you to do things. And, you were in healthcare, so you know exactly what it's like. The ministry, the government, they all make these decisions. And then all the people on the front lines are like, well, how am I going to
Mm.
actually do that? Like it's not possible what you're asking me to do. And so what happened was I ended up taking on the stress of that.
Mm.
And what happened was I started getting nauseous and I had some blurry vision and headaches and things like that. And I just kind of assumed, it's stress, whatever, I'll just deal with it. And then one morning I came to the classroom and I turned on the lights in my classroom and I couldn't see anything.
Wow.
And so I would thought, oh gosh, what like those were not the words that there were other words. But so the vision came back in one of my eyes, but the other eye I had nothing and I had a splitting migraine. Like it was really bad. So I ended up dragging myself up the stairs to my manager. I'm like, I gotta go home. I can't see. She's like, what's happening? I'm like, I don't know. I gotta go. And I left. Like I left. Called
Mm.
the optometrist, ended up at the hospital, all these tests. Anyway, what happened was I ended up in bed for 4 months with vision loss and a constant migraine. And when I
Mm.
say that, people don't really believe me. They're like, oh, you couldn't have had
Yeah.
a migraine. No, like I had a migraine for 4 months. And the only relief I ever got was lying in emergency and they manually pushed the Demerol or what I don't know what they gave me into my vein.
Yeah.
So not even from a drip. And
Mm.
I'd get like a half an hour because I'd pass out from the drugs and then relief. And then as soon as I woke up, it was back.
Mm.
So I ended up, it's called central serous retinopathy. And so the fluid behind the retina
Mhm.
supposed to be kept out of that area
Mm.
and the back of the eye keeps it out, right? Like the tissue keeps it out. But when you have stress, it causes little micro tears and then that causes the fluid to leak through. Our brain normally corrects the vision issues,
Mm.
right? Because we have two images and the brain makes it one so that we
Mm.
see. But my brain was like, no, we're not doing that. Forget it. That's it. You're just not going to have vision. So
Oh.
that was kind of like, I think, the trigger. And
Mm.
then shortly after recovering from that, I kind of changed some things. I went to part-time teaching, became a personal trainer, so started thinking about maybe doing something different. And then I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And that was not like I say it like, oh, I just went to the doctor and they told me I had fibro. No, 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 no. It was like 2 years of pain.
Mhm.
And when I say pain, I would get up in the morning. Well, no, I would wake up in the morning,
Mm.
open my eyes, and figure out how much pain I was in,
Mm.
and then figure out how I was going to get myself out of bed into the shower.
Mm.
Get myself in the shower, cry, like,
Mm.
because the pain was so bad. Like, I'm talking 15 out of 10.
Yeah.
And then how am I going to get myself out of the shower, dressed, and go to work and get through my day? And I did, and lived on Advil, ibuprofen, Gravol, and then came home and went to bed and did it all over again. I did that for years. And I had shooting, it felt like shooting bolts of electricity through my hands and my arms and my feet and my legs. So I didn't sleep ever. I just passed out from exhaustion.
Mm,
And then after about a year and a half was when I got my diagnosis of
mm,
fibro. And then from there lived in this pain recovery cycle because I didn't know what else to do. And then finally I met one of my business mentors actually in the health and wellness industry, and he had suggested I go see somebody that he sees who was someone who deals with energy and how your organs are functioning and kind of how things are moving in the body and or not. And so I started working with him and changed what I ate, changed, worked with um hypnotherapist, did some NLP, so neuro linguistic
mm,
programming, and did a lot of work, forgiveness work,
mm,
self love,
mm,
accepting what I cannot control, like all the things, right? And eventually, this journey has brought me to here.
mm,
And so I work with people who have pain and who have stress, and I teach them tools to minimize those things
mm,
and to live pain free. So now today I'm about a one because I was at a
mm,
retreat working all weekend, and that was a lot for my
mm.
body.
Yep.
First time I had done that. So when I came home last night, it was pretty rough. So today was, I thought it would be worse.
Mm,
And if it had been 10 years ago, I would be in bed all week.
mm. Wow.
But I moved a couple clients around and then trained everybody else, and I'm here with you, and
Mm,
I'm okay. Like I'm about a one. That's how I feel. So it's a very different experience
mm,
doing something like a retreat and working and being with so many people for like 3 days, and then coming home, and my anticipation when I got home last night was, oh god, I'm not going to sleep, the pain's going to be unreal, like I'm not going to be able to function, I might have to cancel all of Monday. And it wasn't like that, but it's because I've kind of gone through the journey and things are under control now. I'm not in that cycle. So if
mm.
anyone who's listening, and you probably know this too, when you're kind of in the cycle
Yes.
of that up and down, I'll say, whether it's pain or it's psychological things or whatever it is,
Mm,
when you're in that up and down and the waves are hitting you, you kind of just ride them, right? Like that's how I felt, that you're just surviving. So you're like,
mm,
okay, the wave is coming. Like I'm on the wave. I'm at the top of the wave, and I know it's going to come down. So am I going to go under?
mm,
Or will I make it out the other end of like, am I going to come up with the wave when it comes up again? And
mm.
you just kind of ride through the ups and downs, and they can be really, really intense and really severe,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm,
now I don't have that.
mm,
So now when I have just a little bit of pain, even my husband, who's amazing support, he'll just kind of go, well, is it really pain? And I'm like, yeah, it's pain. Like I'm a 3 out of 10. And he's like, you were like 15. So you're gonna be okay. I'm like, no, I'm gonna die. So it's always relative though, right? Like back then, if I was 15 and then eventually I got it down to 8, I was
mm,
like, that's awesome. 8 out of 10's awesome. Now I live at like 0. So
mm,
from 2 or 3 is like
mm.
it's comparable to my 15
Yes.
from years ago, right? Because I'm just not used to it anymore.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of where I end. That's where I am now,
Yeah.
in life. Yeah.
And for me, that's so inspiring because, I worked in the healthcare field and I did work on the front line. So I worked in emergency recovery paramedic, and I've seen all that, and I've seen how great the healthcare can be. But why don't they contact people like us? Like they can say, okay, you've got fibromyalgia, then we can do this.
Yeah.
If you go and see a such and such person, they can help as well. Like it's just and that is one reason I had to get out, because I just couldn't do it anymore, because I could see how we can work together. It's not
Yeah.
separation. It's not like, oh, that's all weird, you can't do anything like that. I
It-
wasn't even allowed to talk about anything because, like
mm,
it had to be totally medical. And
yes.
that's why I'm loving talking to you, because I want
Mhm.
this out there. I want it to
Yeah.
be, yes, the medical system's great, but look
Mhm.
at Fran, look at what Fran's gone
Yeah.
through. And,
Yeah.
yes, you've gone through those cycles, but now
Mhm.
look at it.
Yeah. And it's funny because, and I totally agree with you. And I have this, this love-hate relationship with the healthcare industry and this love-hate relationship with the fitness industry. Like I don't, like I call my, like I say I'm a body positive personal trainer, and I am. And the reason I say that and I use the title personal trainer is because people know what that means. Am I a personal trainer? No. If you came to me and ran you through a session, you'd go, "Oh, that's weird. Like we don't. I've never done anything like that before because I don't do the typical stuff. Like I have all the equipment in the studio, but that's not how I train. I do mobility work. I do balance work. I do breath work. I do like let's open the meridians before we move. Like let's talk about pelvic floor health and how pelvic floor helps your balance and helps you like walk around. Like I do that kind of stuff, and I think sometimes in those industries like the fitness industry and the healthcare industry, like you said, it's the medical way, it's only this way. And I think now, we're getting, because there's so much science behind it. I think that's the thing. People think, well, when I talk about, opening the meridians, well, that's woo woo. It's not woo woo. The ancient Chinese have been doing meridian work for 3,000 years. Pretty sure it's not woo woo. They've been doing herbal remedies for 3,000 years or more, right? Like the ancient Egyptians did all this stuff long before we had modern medicine. So, or the Aboriginals and the native peoples, the indigenous peoples, like they all do plant medicine. They all work with the earth. Like they do all that stuff, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. So we didn't invent medical care. Like we just invented the Western form, or the more traditional form of it, right? And I just find it interesting because when people think, oh, that's really woo woo, like you do energy. Well, aren't we energy? Like, is that not what we are? Is energy? That's how we're like when if you actually study science and quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and we're just matter, like we're just energy balls, a whole bunch of them put together.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they hold together so that we're a body. Like,
Hmm.
right? In essence, that's what we are. So I do find it kind of interesting when I talk to other people like yourself, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I was there and I was in healthcare," and it's like they think that I'm crazy when I talk about this energy or this, like you're an intuitive artist and mentor. Intuitive, like what's that? Well, I don't know, because we follow that everything in our life is intuitive. Like it's and but we get the label of this weird kind of thing, right? But that's
Mm.
that's a different podcast episode,
Yes,
Darlene.
it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Now, I would love, so one of the areas that you wanted to talk about was grieving the past and, moving on. And I would love to talk about that because that's
Okay.
something that I'm quite passionate about because of the medical field. I thought of grieving as traditional medical way, you lose somebody, you grieve, or you lose a limb, you grieve. And then when I left, I realized that there's so many other forms of grieving. Like, I just did not realize. So I'd love for you to talk about, what you see.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had this conversation with a client actually this morning about grieving. She's going through a transition at work and doesn't know whether she's going to return, and I said, "Well, have you grieved like your former self?" Like cuz she's been doing a lot of work, and we like I work with people not just on the pain aspect, but I work on mindset, and we talk about stress management and negativity and setting boundaries, like all different things to move forward, right? And I said, like, have you grieved this idea that you're not that person anymore? And she's like, well, yeah. And did you? And she's like, well, so and I'm gonna explain. She goes, well, I did it in my way. What's that mean? And she's like, well, I feel. I'm thinking, oh no, here we go, right? Like, okay. She's like, so I feel that grieving should be, this is who I was. I'm not that person anymore. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to cry. I'm going to scream, do whatever I need to, whatever that looks like. And then I'm going to move on to the next part of who I am. And I'm like, that's not how grief works. Goes, I know, but that's how it should work. That's how I want it to work. I'm like, yeah, this is not how it works. It's like, I think it's any kind of mindset stuff that you
Mm,
do, thought work that you do, right? Is
mhm,
that it's like, you have, like Shrek says, like Donkey, right? And Shrek, we have layers. It's like I'm like an onion. I have layers, right? So I take the top layer off and I'm like, oh yes, okay, so I'm not this, teacher anymore,
mm,
and I'm not this person that's in this pain cycle anymore, but I have to really acknowledge that person,
mm,
really thank that person for
mhm,
the lessons and the trials and the tribulations, and release that so that I can step into the newer version of myself, the next version of myself. And when you do that, I think for all of us, you, me, all your listeners that have done this work,
mm,
we kind of and I don't know, and tell me if this resonates with you, but like you do the work and you go, and I always say to people, you got to go through it to get through
mhm,
it. Like
mhm,
you got to go through it, and it's like walking through fire.
mhm.
Like
Yep.
it really is like walking through fire sometimes, like, right? And you feel all the emotions and you're exhausted and you do the work and you're like, okay, I did the thing that I
Mm,
was coached to do.
mhm.
Okay, I'm done. Let's go to the next thing, right? And then something happens, or there's a situation or a word or a thought that floats through your head, and then you go, "Oh man, there's the layer. There's the layer. It just showed up." And you're like, "Did I just did this." Like I remember saying to my hypnotherapist that I was working with. I'm like, didn't we do this work like 3 months ago? She goes, that's the first layer. We're like layer 3 now. And I'm like, yeah, like, yeah. But that's kind of what it's like. So I
Mm,
think when we talk about grieving, as much as we say the words,
mm,
I don't really think it's I don't want to say there's no final
mm,
grieving and that it ends ever, like that it doesn't end, because it does. But I think what happens is we start to shift our perspective. And I think for me anyway, I feel a little bit of a dissociation, like a removal from it.
yes.
So for me, the grieving process is I'm removed, like I'm one step removed. Once I do that first bit of healing, I'm one step removed.
Mm,
And okay, then it comes up again. I'm like, okay, we're at the next layer. Okay.
mm,
And then I go through the work and it gets a little bit easier because I haven't done I'm not at the super tough stuff because I did that. That was step one, right? Then I get to the next thing and okay, so now I'm another step removed.
mm,
And now when I think back to who I was back
mm,
then, like I don't even know who that person was.
yeah.
And I don't mean from the sense of pain or anything. I just mean like my personality
Mhm,
and how I interacted with people or
mhm,
didn't interact with people. And like even like this past weekend, going to a retreat for 3 days. I would never in my wildest dreams imagine that I would go to this retreat as a facilitator,
mm,
right? Let alone not even as a
mm,
participant, but as a facilitator, and be with like 200 plus people that I don't know, and like, oh, good morning, Bella, and like have a great time. Like it was a great experience
mm,
and it was so fun. But years ago, I never would have done that because I was in so much pain and I didn't even know who I was.
mhm,
How could I be with other people and help guide them and
mm,
so grieving, for me anyway, grieving is a process,
mm,
and I don't think it really does end, but I think you just kind of, I look at it like a movie now. So when I think about all the things, I think, oh yeah, like that was me like 10 years ago. Wow, like a lot has changed in 10
mm,
years because I don't recognize that person. So you kind of drop away the layers of
mm,
yourself, if that makes sense, if that
yeah. Yeah.
kind of resonates. Yeah.
Totally. Like everything you've just said, it's like, yes, yes, that's me. Because I had to go through that whole process as well. Because 30 years in a career is a big time. And, I didn't realize. And the first year was literally just surviving because I was depressed. I was suicidal. And like being
Mm,
a nurse, I had every available, like I
yeah.
had everything. And so the first year was just surviving. And then I could go, oh my goodness, okay, what's happened? What's going on? And yeah, it was exactly as you said, it's going through the layers. And I do love how you said detachment because it's not it's not as though, oh yeah, that's like that. It's not, it's actually looking back and I'm actually now looking at everything that I learnt as a nurse and everything and what I can actually bring into my business. And it's amazing to be able to be to that stage.
Yeah, and it's good for like that's amazing. Like you're so inspiring to other people, like that you've gone through this journey and where you were and then where
Mm,
you are now. And I think too sometimes when we talk about, mindset work and forgiveness and all these kinds of things, people kind of go, like I'm not forgiving. Like I had a client once who's like, I'm not doing forgiveness work, and I'm like, okay, okay. And she was like, I'm not. And I said, no problem. Okay. And then I remember, I work with clients in 12-week blocks, right? So I remember about halfway through, um, week 6 or 7, she's like, we start our call. I get on the call. I'm like, how are you today? I'm so mad at you. And I'm thinking, I just got here. Like, I'm amazing, but I don't know what I did to make me that amazing that you're already mad at me. She goes, you and your forgiveness work. And she's like wigging her finger at me and she's pointing at me through the Zoom. And I'm like, what? She goes, you put the idea in my head about this forgiveness thing. And then I found this letter from a long time ago and it brought up all these thoughts. And now what I have two choices. I'm either going to be angry at that person or I'm going to forgive them. And now I don't know which one to pick. And I'm like, well, I feel you should pick the forgiveness path. She goes, but I'm angry. And so but it was just interesting because
mm,
all I said was like, forgiveness is part of it. And she's like, I'm not doing it.
yeah.
And then that was it. Like, I didn't even, I'm like, okay, we got other stuff. You got stress, you got boundaries, we got other things to work on. Don't worry about it. And then when she goes, and you put that thought in my head, and now I can't stop thinking about it. And so that's kind of, I think, the important piece for
Mhm.
people that are listening is that you don't have to do anything necessarily. We, myself, Darlene, other people that do what we do, will just say something to
Mhm.
you. And at some point, I truly believe this, at some point, your subconscious mind is going to latch onto it, right? And that's the one that gives you what you want, right? So it's going to latch on. So that thought of forgiveness work stuck into your brain somewhere in the subconscious mind, it grabbed it and it said, we're going to keep this here
Yeah.
just a little bit. And then, as the universe does, like happened with my client, she just was going through her desk or a drawer or something and discovered this letter that she had. She's like, I don't even know the last time I looked at it. And then there's this letter, and I open up, and I didn't even know what it was. She's like, I opened this piece of paper, and I started reading this, and I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And she's like, I was so mad. But that's what happens, right? When you're ready,
Mm,
open up. When you're ready, you'll get connected with the right
mm,
people. Like when you're ready, you'll start to shift the way that you're sort of thinking about things or the perspective that you have as you're
mm,
thinking about the things that are going through in your mind or your life or what have you. So it's interesting because I think you and I, when we work with people, we're very deliberate about what we say and what we do and what we ask them to do.
mhm,
And sometimes it's really just well, let's just see what like with you as an intuitive artist, like it
mm,
might just be, hey Fran, let's draw how you feeling today.
mm.
Like, why don't we do that? And I'm like, I don't know how I'm feeling. That's okay. Just let's see what comes out on the paper. You know what I mean? And then from there, you kind of go, wow, like, look at that.
Mm,
And then that gives me something to think about.
mhm.
But all you did was say, let's draw how you feel. Use some color today,
Yeah.
right? You didn't do anything. You didn't say anything or give me a particular task.
Mhm.
But my subconscious and what I'm ready to do
Mm,
comes out on the paper, right?
yeah.
So it is an interesting process. And
Mm,
grief is, and if you study the stages of
mm.
grief,
Oh, yeah.
you study them, they're like, well, first there's this, and then there's this. Really? Because that's not what happens. So I feel I don't know who made the chart of the order of the different levels of areas of grief. That's not what it looks like.
Mhm.
It looks like this. It goes like this. It's like a zigzaggy spiral up and down all over the place. And if you're lucky, you're like, oh, look at that's denial. Oh, look at me. There's anger. Like that's what happens I think, with grief is
Mm,
that you kind of sit in it or not.
mm,
And then one day something pops up and you go, oh, well, what's that all about? You're
mm,
like, oh, I'm angry. And you don't, I think, too, the detachment part and this, I think, for many people, when they're dealing with, chronic illness or, depression, suicidal thought, like all these things that we've gone through, that we have a detachment because we don't want to deal.
mm.
right? So then when something comes up, you're like, what's that all about?
Mm,
And you don't know because you're not dealing with it.
mhm,
But when you start to then dig into, well, what is that?
mm,
Then when those emotions or these thoughts pop up, then you go, oh, that's the anger from XYZ. Okay, gotcha. And that could have been 10 years ago, but
mm,
it's showing up now because now I'm ready. Like you're at a point where you're ready to deal with it,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
In a certain capacity. So
Mm,
I think that's part of it as well, is that sometimes people think it's sort of this linear process,
yeah.
and none of it is linear. Like it looks, I'm sure
Looks like some
you
drawing.
dive into your story, it looks like this happened, like even how I described it, first this, then this. That's not how it looked. Like if
Exactly.
I were to draw the picture, not what it looked like at all, like at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and my journey with grief has been really interesting because growing up, I was taught, be seen, not heard, suppress all your feelings, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So then I leave nursing, and then suddenly, I'm surviving, and then I go, okay, I need to do something. See a psychologist, start doing a diploma of counseling, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
You mean I've got
Yeah.
to feel? What? What? You mean there's emotions? What are you talking about?
Well,
So,
yeah, because you were shut down for so long. Right? But but the thing is too, I mean, and I think that's part of the process.
mm,
When you're in something, okay, like with what you were dealing with with mental health,
mm,
and then what I was dealing with my pain, like, and the stress, like you shut down because you're like, I cannot,
mhm,
it's like a dam. Like
mm,
it really is. I cannot deal with one piece because you can't just take out one little piece and go, okay, I'm just gonna do this
yeah.
little, like when my clients, I'm like, I'm not doing forgiveness. Okay.
Mm,
Like you can't not do that.
mhm,
You can only get so far, but you're not ready to deal with it. So when it comes up, and again, I agree, like that's how I was. You don't show your emotions. It's weak. You
yeah.
don't cry. Keep your mouth shut,
Yeah.
just because otherwise people will think bad things about you and they'll judge you and blah blah blah. And so you just don't. And so then
Mhm,
when something comes up and you actually have to deal with it, you're like, I don't know how to cope with
mm,
feeling angry, sad. What do I do with that? Oh,
mm,
let's just push that down.
yeah.
And then that's where the pain comes in,
Mhm,
because our emotions we have to do something with them.
mhm,
And if we don't deal with them, feel them, and then let them, like, release them out, the body will manifest as pain.
oh, yes.
Well, absolutely. So, like, for people that are listening to this, if you have not read You Can Heal Your Life by
Mm,
Louise Hay, absolutely. I'm sure you recommend this to your client. You have to read it.
mm,
It will change your mind. Like, there are so many good things out there. The Body Keeps the Score is a great book on pain. Cure Mind Over Body is another great book on pain management. There's so many things out there about the body and our emotions
mm,
and how they're connected,
yep,
that I think it can be very overwhelming,
mm,
first of all, but
mm,
it also can be very uncomfortable because people, you kind of then come to the realization, and I don't know if you did, but I did, that you kind of go, oh, like I walked around for X number of years of my life. So, well, let's say 12 years, because let's go through just my stress and the vision and the fibro. Like I went through life for like this 12-year period where I was so detached from my body, and I literally was just surviving
mm,
from like one moment to the next
mhm,
and preparing for a flare.
mhm,
Like that was my life, that I would constantly be thinking about, okay, what's going to happen? When is
mm,
it going to flare? Where will I be? How long will I be in bed?
mm,
Right?
yep,
And then, but then when you start to actually acknowledge these emotions and deal with them, then when they come up, you're like, oh, you again. Okay,
yeah,
please come in.
yeah,
Let's do what we need to do, and then you can go. Like, because that's how it is now, right? You're like,
yeah,
oh, my old friend, come,
mhm,
let's have some tea and figure this out.
yep,
So you just shifts the way that you look at it, right?
mhm,
But when you don't know how to deal with it, or you've never been taught that, which we weren't,
mm.
then you got to figure it out, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was taught none of that in nursing at all, none. And yeah, I'm actually a medical intuitive as well. So I've actually, like Louise Hay, but even deeper. So when
Mhm.
something comes up, I can go, okay, why has that come up? What's going on? And I also work with the chakras as well, like really in depth.
Mhm.
So I'll go, okay, so what's coming up there must be related to that, blah, blah. And
Yep.
it's so cool. Like, was it Sunday? I started off with a headache, and I went, okay, you're going to turn into a migraine if I don't do something right now. So I
Yeah.
went into it and gone. And I'm just like, whoa, this is so
Yeah.
good. Like even with everything I've done, it's still like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and there are days too where, you know what, I will have a little bit of pain and I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna feel the pain
Mm,
because what I like, and this is the thing I think that I feel people that are listening need to hear this.
mm,
We allow ourselves to live in pain, and I'll use that as the example, whatever pain is, whether it's emotional, physical, whatever it is. We allow ourselves to live there, to accept the pain because there is some benefit.
mhm,
And I don't say this as a judgment at all,
mm,
but if I have pain and I'm the primary caregiver in my home,
mhm,
I take care of the family, the food, the kids, the
mhm,
laundry, the groceries, all the things, right? And I work and all the
mhm,
other stuff, right? All the problems. I
mhm,
do all that stuff. If I have a pain flare, then the benefit to me potentially is that I can say, you know what, guys, I got a flare. I'm
mhm,
in pain. I'm going to bed.
mm,
I'll see you tomorrow. Do whatever you want for dinner. I don't care if laundry gets done. Don't even care if you go to school.
mhm,
I'm out. Like, I'm out. Like, you get to check out.
mm,
And you get to literally go in bed, take drugs,
mhm.
and hide under the covers. Like, honestly, right? And
Yep.
that's what sometimes happens when you're in a major flare.
Mm,
And everybody in the family is like, okay, don't go in there because she's not well right now.
mm,
Like, we need to leave her to be alone. So from a pain point of view, do I want the pain? I don't want, in
mm,
quotation marks, it. However, it gives me a break.
mm,
And so for some people, if they get out of that, then they don't get the break.
mm,
And when you have that for so long, it becomes your identity. You become the person that has fibromyalgia. I
mhm,
did a podcast with someone that had fibro, and she said to me, she goes, well, I don't have fibro anymore. I said, what? Like, she was interviewing me, right? I said, oh, you don't? She goes, no, no, I'm in remission. And I went, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about it that way. She goes, well, I fully believe that you're in remission as well. And I'm like, I never really,
mm,
that's interesting. I
mm,
never really thought about it, but then I was like, well, because I don't have the pain and I don't have the flare cycle. So, but it's just interesting how it shifts your perspective on how you think about something, right?
mhm. It does, yeah. Yep. Yep. Oh, I can't thank you enough. I honestly could talk forever because we're talking the same stuff. It's like I could talk so much forever. And I really want to
Yeah.
thank you, Fran, for being on today. And for everyone watching, please check the description because I've actually got links to where you can find Fran. And please, go and check her out because this is what it's all about. Is for me, there is no competition. There is no competition. And that's why I'm so passionate about interviewing beautiful women like you and getting the messages out there. So thank you
Mhm.
everyone for watching and thank you Fran for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome.